And we're live. Welcome back to another Corona Geek, here where we talk all about mobile application development using Corona SDK. I'm your host, Charles McKeever, and today it's Thanksgiving. At least it's Thanksgiving in Canada. It's Columbus Day here in the U.S.
You scared me there, man. I'm like, what? Did I miss the holiday? What?
Really screw people up,
Am
right?
I back out of it? Oh man! I mean,
Sorry there, I didn't mean to mess you up. If you're listening to this in the car and you're like, what? Wait, what? It's Thanksgiving, and you're on your way to work.
Some people's reaction driving to like, what?
What? Yes, it's Thanksgiving in Canada, which I think is cool. I think it's cool to have Thanksgiving twice. I think for next year we should do that. We'll do Thanksgiving here for Columbus Day, and then we'll do Thanksgiving, and then we'll do Christmas. And for all the people who are like, think we're already messing with the holidays, they'll be really, really thrown off. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. We're going to start a brand new series of development discussion. Last week we finished up our Monsters Need Coins program or development series, which actually started off as a Gravity. What was it? It was working with Gravity or Gravity-based games, and then somewhere along the way it developed the name of Monsters Need Coins, and eventually, the project became sophisticated enough that Ed decided we needed a visual editor. So he put together a visual editor, and we went through the code last time. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, and by the way, download the code for the game and the editor, then you need to go to youtube.com/coronageek and just look back in the archive there, and everything is listed. And if you can't find the link to the code, then you can find that over at coronalabs.com/blog, where, of course, the videos are posted as well, along with all the show notes for the videos and stuff. But this is Corona Geek 163, and so if you go back 162, 161, 160, all that, you'll find it. And there's also a playlist on Corona Geek on YouTube. So I try to put those all in the playlist so they make sense, because as we go along, some of this stuff we kind of know what we're going to talk about, and then some of this stuff we make up along the way. Like the visual editor was a kind of an afterthought. And so I try to take those videos and then stick them into a playlist so that at least if you go to YouTube, you can see them all together and you don't have to fish through episode numbers. But anyway. Hey, before we get started on today's topic, which is going to be desktop game development using controllers and keyboard inputs and things like that, Ed, I want to talk about this link to the in-app ad blocking software.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I
couldn't believe it. It's like we were talking about it, and there it was.
Yeah. So for everybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, we had Dean Murphy on the show to talk about Crystal, which is an iOS 9 content blocker, which he has specifically decided to target ads, and essentially so it's an ad blocker, even though Apple likes to call them content blockers, which is really what they are. And anyway, so that led a discussion on blocking ads on websites. So inside of Safari on your mobile device, on your iPhone or your iPad or whatever, you can block ads, which kind of got us to thinking, well, that just sounds like in-app ads could potentially be blocked at some point, and would Apple allow that? And lo and behold, Ed sent me a link last week, where their app had been approved in the Apple App Store, and that app essentially blocks ads inside of apps. So, Ed, did you download this thing and mess with it?
No, I was just stunned, just because we'd been talking about all this, and then saying sort of nonchalantly, well, they're not going to do this. Only applies to browsers. We don't have to worry about apps. And
yeah,
just
Did you hear that this application has been removed from App Store?
I did see a follow-up conversation that said that some apps had been removed. Apps that basically use VPN to kind of pick up on your traffic and then filter it. Those have been removed.
The application that filters ads inside other applications and games. So it was blocked because it uses VPN, and VPN can sniff all user information and stuff, so it is not secure. And Apple decided to remove it.
So basically, they just reversed their decision to leave it in the store.
They do that on occasion.
Yeah, it got past a reviewer and then got pulled.
Well, it got more attention, and finally they saw some issues and they decided to remove it.
Well, I installed it. It was called Bean Choice. I installed it, and yeah, it popped up a little VPN box at the top of my iPhone. And one of the things that I noticed right away was that I installed it, and then I did a video on it to kind of try to demonstrate it. And at that time, I said, well, I'll just disable I need to disable the plugin or whatever, or the extension. And it was not easy to disable at all. Like you would disable it, and then it would automatically turn itself back on, which was kind of disconcerting because it felt like they really wanted to, to not only filter your ads, but maybe even be a part of all of your other traffic. So
be a part of your whole life.
Yeah, be a part of your whole life. And one of the things that it was a free app, and one of the things that they said was that they would actually even pay you to participate, which leads me to think, well, there's some money behind their endeavors, right? And that didn't really feel.
That's almost like phishing 2.0.
It is, right? Access. Yeah, we'll get rid of your ads. You just give us access to all of your personal information.
Prince and wherever, Kenya, will pay you to use my app.
Right. Yeah, it's a little weird. So, yeah, I guess. So, Sergey, you say it's out of the store now. It's gone. I actually jumped on it for that very fact. I wanted to see what it would do, and I just felt like Apple was going to pull it, and I wanted to go ahead and I've already experienced it.
But I'm pretty sure you can still use this method if you manually set up your VPN.
Yeah, well, and what would it do in that case? I mean, how would they do the blocking? Would it just have to set up your own content blocker, or is this actually just VPN entirely?
No, it's just entirely VPN. So this application only makes automatic setup of your VPN account, and it just makes, I don't know, a button to turn it off or on, I don't know, some adjustments, some settings, and that's all. So basically, you can do it manually, even on a computer, on a normal computer, not on a mobile phone.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what I did. I ran it. And I'll actually, I didn't publish the video because I felt like there were security implications to it, right? And I didn't want to necessarily encourage somebody to put the thing on their phone if it did in fact, have security implications. So, but now that it's been taken down, maybe I'll make a modified version of it or something. Anyway, when I ran the app, several different apps that had ads in them, what I noticed was that banner ads were gone, for sure. Interstitials, the overlays and stuff still showed, but the videos didn't show. And then if you had anything that was in-game rewards, those videos would still show, but I suspect that's only because, for whatever reason, those videos weren't being, those URLs or those services or whatever weren't a part of the blacklist or whatever they were using to block.
So they weren't necessarily whitelisted, but they weren't blacklisted. So they got
I felt like I don't know who was serving the ads in this particular app, but it was it was a catch app, and so they were monetizing it with banners, interstitials, and rewarded in-game content. And of the three, only one of them worked, and so it really was kind of like, it's very, very telling as far as what can be done inside of an app to block ads. So
I think it's kind of scary, actually.
Yeah. So, well, is it coming? Is a new iteration a more Apple-approved way coming? Who knows? I don't know.
I wonder, though. See, this not to distract here, but now that we've raised this question of VPNs and the way they implemented this, I have to wonder if Apple would have caught another application that didn't say, hey, by the way, we're blocking ads. It's like, some game that's some simple game that also has a VPN sniffer in it,
Yeah. The little less high profile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm starting to think,
Well, I tell you,
I don't want to give any bad guys ideas out there, but I'm sure
yeah,
they've already thought of it.
yeah. It was still very much it was still very much a manual process. I mean, I didn't really see.
I'm assuming that when you ran this,
Mhm.
if you do post that video, I'll definitely watch it. But I'm assuming that there were steps you had to say yes to certain things to make it possible.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think in this instance there would have been a motivation.
Brad said the same thing here.
Yeah. There would have been a motivation to take the action that the app was requesting, right? So if Flappy Bird comes up and says, "Hey, we want you to enable VPN," you'd be like, "What?" Might be a little weird, but anyway, it's certainly, we'll call it a proof of concept. And from a proof of concept standpoint, yeah, you can block ads in apps. So I think it's just another.
Okay, but what's going to be the long-term implications for this? We're going to see the death of the free app, which in my mind, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
And then we're going to be shifting more and more to either purchase the app or in-app purchases instead of using advertisement for the source of income for app developers.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I would argue for apps that gain a certain level of popularity, maybe even merchandising and things like that, right? Go into physical goods,
yes,
and make money from that. So
yes,
Hapico.
This is a maturing of the industry. You know, we're into our 7th or 8th year of mobile app development. We're past the problems of the past of the whole free stuff. Hold on, I gotta shut down my dogs.
You got a cough over there?
They totally agree. Yeah, and the guys, LaserDog, they created Hapico, and they said that they just wanted to make the best game they could make, and they just made it for sale. They don't want to do any sort of crazy ads or anything like that. And they even, that game is, I don't know if you've seen Hapico, but it's completely. I think we've all seen it, right? Here, I'm talking about to the general audience. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's totally suited to ads because you die a lot, and the level restarts a lot, and they could have just easily said, well, we're just going to put ads in it and go from there, but that was sort of fundamentally against their philosophy, and they thought it would be a bad user experience, and so anyway, my point there is that they also at the same time have done a lot to promote the app, and they have T-shirts and things like that, and so they've done wallpapers, and I mean it would be perfect for a very tight group of people who love the game to buy stickers or T-shirts or whatever. So monetization, yeah, not just
monetization. I hear that word now, my brain goes, okay.
not just ads
No
anymore.
more talk about. Can't
Yeah.
we just have a magic money button, please?
Right. Well, and I think personally, I feel like in-game rewards are a step in the right direction. Although, the ads I think still need to be highly targeted or relevant to the audience, right? It just can't just be another game of war ad over and over and over again.
What? You don't like those Game of War ads?
Well, but here's the thing. Here's my thing with all advertising. I've already, if I already have that thing, let's say I don't have that game, but let's say I did have that game, right? Just stop showing the ad to me. I'm done. Right?
That's coming next. Now that you've said it, somebody's going to figure out a way to sniff what games and stuff you've got installed, or figure that out so they can show you just ads that will be new and different.
Well, maybe there's just a button that says where I can say I already have it. Like stop showing me this ad. I realize people are just going to punch the button every time until they don't see any ads. But are they the person that you're really talking to anyway?
Yeah. It would
You
be
know?
interesting though. Sort of like Hulu does, where they ask you, you watch Hulu much?
Yeah. Well,
Hulu's got
I
this
haven't in a
thing
long
on their
time, but yeah.
ads where you watch it, and a little pop-up comes up in the like upper right corner. It says, "Does this ad apply to you?"
Hmm.
So that you can say no, and you'll get better, hopefully better ads eventually after they
Yeah.
get queued out.
You're right. Yeah, exactly. I know um, um, I bought a refrigerator thanks to Laura Talardi. Thanks, Laura. She sent me a link to these retro refrigerators, and we bought one. And of course, they do a lot of sales via online, which you wouldn't. I just never thought to buy a refrigerator online. But anyway, after I went and visited the website, I started seeing ads for the refrigerator all over the place. And even after the refrigerator had arrived and we installed it, I still saw these ads all over the place. And I'm thinking, you know, I have it.
Yeah. Did you say you used Google to do the search?
Yeah, well, yeah, of course,
Yeah,
yeah.
man. Google's gotten aggressive on the whole sniffing
They
what you're
have.
searching
Yeah,
for nowadays.
yeah, they have. They have. Yeah, I
Vlad
was talking.
says here that I think most ad networks already do it, and he was referring to, I believe, what we were talking about, where they determine if you've already got the game or not. Or maybe he was referring to the does it. Yeah, so checking if games are installed. I'm not sure if that's true, but that would be interesting to know if they have that ability to somehow look at your inventory. It seems
Yeah.
like that would be private.
Well, yeah, it seems like you would want it to be private.
Yeah, I
So,
don't
yeah,
necessarily want any company to be able to tell what apps I've got installed on my phone.
right, right, yeah. So anyway, so interesting.
They might know if you've got the game installed.
Right, interesting
They
turn
might
of
be able to
events.
figure that out. Yeah,
Right.
their game. That's a possibility.
Well, you know, if I've ever punched the button, if I punched the button and hit I guess, yeah, if I punched the button and said install,
Right,
right,
yeah, they should
they
be
should
able
be
to
able to,
figure that out. You're right.
yeah, at
Oh,
least to that much.
maybe that's what Vlad's saying is. I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off here, Charles, but right. You're saying is if you downloaded the app through the advertisement process, then yeah, they would definitely have that information if they tracked it. Huh.
Cool. Something to think about. Something to
Yeah.
think about. I think, yeah, I completely agree with Brian that it's a maturing of things. I think you know for a long time we've all known that it's very hard to make money with apps. Um, you have to have a lot of volume in order to do ads, and it makes for a less than stellar user experience. So I think we need to focus on other things, really.
Yeah.
You know, and I do, like I said, I still do think that in-game rewards are great, even if they don't have ads, right? We talk about that in the context of, oh, you watch this video and you get these gems. I play one game. I don't have my phone sitting in front of me. In fact, I don't even know where my phone is. That's weird. Oh, there it is. I play this one game, and in the in-game currency is you die frequently, and then you use gems to continue from where you left off. So if you want to, you can say no, don't spend any gems or coins or whatever, and then you'll go back to the beginning of the game. But if you have enough, let's just say coins, if you have enough coins, then you can say, oh no, I want to continue to pick up from wherever my last checkpoint was. And then if you run out of coins, then at that point you can take some sort of action. And in their case, they say, well, watch this video and we'll give you some more coins, right? That could just as easily be an in-app purchase, or it could be some other element of the game that is that action, but it's still an in-game reward. So I think I like that concept because we all like to be rewarded. So it's definitely
I'm always
going.
talking about how I like to be rewarded on the show.
Yeah, and we all like it, right? We all like a little something, even if it doesn't matter. It
And I
doesn't
don't
matter
mean
what
like
it is.
sweet. I mean like cling, cling, cling.
Well, you know, speaking of which, I few years ago, well, it's probably been longer than that. About 5 years ago, I went to Las Vegas, and as a kid, I lived just off the street of Vegas, not on the streets in Vegas, but just around the corner from the Strip. And when you go into casino, you had that. You always had that ching 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 ching. Ching. There was all this coin dropping all around you. And about 5 years ago, I went to Vegas, and everything's digital now. There's like very few of the coin machines anymore, if at all.
So no more of the ratchety mechanical sounds?
No, it's all bling 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 bling. You know, it still makes noise.
It still makes a noise, but it doesn't have that like old time.
It's not. Yeah, it's not authentic, right? It's not that. You can almost. You used to be almost to feel the money in your pocket, and now it's just. Now the game that you play on your iPhone and the sound that comes out of the slot machines is about the same.
Wow, that's sad. Soon there'll be a whole generation that doesn't know what a real slot machine sounds like.
Yeah. They'll know what getting their money taken is.
Yeah, they'll know that
never changes. All right.
That's always true, though. That's
All
very
right.
true. Actually, it's probably less true with the new machine, where I think maybe the older machines were. I don't know. You can rig them both to cheat. So.
Yeah, I don't know how that works out now.
I was doing, this is totally off topic and I don't want to distract too far, but a long time ago I did a slot machine tutorial, starter kit, whatever, and here for Corona. And I did a bunch of reading on this, and it was really interesting. I mean, how people cheat the system, and I got distracted when I was doing it and started reading about all kinds of mechanical cheats that people used to implement and stuff like that to make more money on these games.
Interesting.
I mean, the makers of the machines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So try to skew the odds in their favor.
Yeah, stuff that they would do to skew the odds. Because I was really curious, because with the mechanical wheel, in your initial view, it's just going to be a complete distribution of whatever's on the wheel, you would think. Not so. Little mechanicals. Some mechanical engineer made big bucks figuring out how to, like, pause the wheel a little bit here or speed the wheel up a little bit there and focus in on what they want you to get.
Right. Interesting. Well, hey, I don't want to get too far off either. So today we're going to intro desktop development.
Today we're going to have an easy introduction into desktop. We're going to get started on the discussion and have a basis for future shows and sort of like what we'll be making together.
Well, you had mentioned also inputs, so keyboard inputs and controller inputs. So how do you see that laying out?
No, actually, that's the starting point.
Okay.
The starting point, in my opinion, for any game really, is clearly you have to have an idea of the kind of game or games that you want to make. And that will sway you, but you have to look at the device you've got and what the outputs are you have available, and in this case, what the inputs are that you have available to you, because those will shape in some way the game that you can make.
Well, we should say before we get too far in that there's a new public release out, which you can go and download right from coronalabs.com, and desktop is now an option, and it's still in beta, but you can build for desktop. On the Mac side of things, controller support is baked in, and so you can build desktop apps using a controller. And the Windows side of things, that's being worked on and is, I'll go out on a limb and say close to completion. I'm told that it's very, very close to completion. We should have it very soon. So, of course, things are always kind of touch and go with development. But what's that? That
will fit perfectly with the way I've structured the discussion.
Yeah, I always love how these things work out. We don't really put a whole lot of brain power behind making things fit, but it always seems to work out really well.
Yep. Well, you got to keep your eye on the pulse of things, or
right.
However you want to phrase that to make it make sense. Keep your eye on the pulse. Whatever. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen while I go off on my soliloquy about.
Hey, by the way, I love all these profile thumbnails here. Sergey has he looks like he's on a soap opera or something. He's got
I know, that's like what do they call those pictures where they get the picture?
The headshot.
Glamour shot.
Yeah, the glamour shot. It's like a
glamour shot.
He looks like a Days of Our Lives star or something. Yeah, for sure. For all those people who know what Days of Our Lives are.
I don't know though. I have to say that my favorite picture for that people put up for on our Hangouts has got to be Jason Schroeder's, because he took his. Obviously, it was a snapshot that was like what was feeding out of his camera when he was on the Hangout. So you're like, is he just holding really still, or?
You're right. Yeah, he looks like he's there, but he's not moving. Yeah.
So I see it sometimes. I'm like, wait a minute, is Jason just messing with me or what? All right. So as I was saying, inputs. So what I want to talk about today is inputs, and then sort of segue into choosing once and for all the game that we're going to make, because that's not really set in stone at this point. To start this discussion, I like to categorize desktop inputs, or yeah, let's call it that, desktop inputs, into 4 basic categories: keyboard, mouse, controller/joystick. I lump those together, and then other. So the other is just about anything. Now that's really, I shouldn't have said desktop inputs, because now we're talking more stuff like handheld controllers for your TV, or extra buttons on the controller that one controller does have and another controller doesn't. So really, if you want to, you could mash up gamepads and other, because at that point everything is really starting to get complicated, and you're looking at multiple events and data sources to pull together a full picture of what the user is doing when they're interacting with your game. So the way I'm going to approach this discussion is I'm going to talk about keyboards, and then mice, and then I'm going to leave the controller discussion on the table undiscussed until it's supported under Windows and OS X, which may sound bad, but the reason I'm doing it is because I am nearly strictly a Windows-based developer. I do all my work in Windows. And so in order to demonstrate this stuff for you guys, I would need to switch over to my Mac, and while I could certainly do it, it would be a lot of effort to like switch over during the show, or I'd have to schedule it, do a different show. So I'll wait until controller input comes around for Windows, and then we can have a discussion on the do's and don'ts and inputs of that.
Yeah, and it's, I think that's fair too, because you know, Corona tries to make parity between platforms, but at the same time, Windows and OS X are going to be, very different. So there may be some distinctions between the two in terms of controller support.
Yeah, actually, that's an excellent point. Is there probably controllers are just a massively complicated discussion initially, because there are so many varieties of controllers. In fact, I'm going to switch off my camera just to make this point, or switch back to my screen here. There are so many kinds of controllers, right? Like my personal favorite is the Xbox 360 controller, and I use the USB Windows connected variety, although of course I've got one for my Xbox downstairs. Then you've got what is this? The green
throttle.
Green throttle, which they chose a similar form factor, very similar to the Xbox 360. I have a PS2 controller, but I didn't pull it out of the cabinet. Oh yeah, and then my other interesting, the other one I find very interesting is the Ouya controller, which has it has the joystick, and it follows the same layout sort of the other two, but then they did something weird. They incorporated a mouse. So this part right here is a mouse, but it's only a mouse pad. So my point here is that controllers come in all flavors and styles, and you've got to consider that when developing for them. You got to sort of like say, okay, I got to identify all these various inputs and treat them all the same. I got to say for sure that I know I'll have these on most controllers, but other controllers maybe not. So these will be like extra buttons that the user can assign to additional functionality. Another thing is the joysticks don't all work exactly the same, or some joysticks are a little more noisy. So without going all the way into the joystick discussion, what I'm going to do at this point is simply say, for those people who are on OS X who want to go right now and do joysticks and that's their thing, you're covered. You should go read the tutorial treasury And Rob and the guys have already put together some really good tutorials on dealing with game controllers and axes and stuff like that. And so you can find that here. In fact, it covers additional things, some of the things we're talking about today. So it's it's a great collection of what is possible right now with Corona.
Have you tried the Xbox One?
I don't actually have an Xbox One.
The controllers in that are, I mean, I think it's by far the best controller so far.
See, I knew I was going to say I like the 360, and somebody else is going to say no, I like the Xbox One.
I know it, and I don't typically pay attention to these things. I play. I've been playing since the early Nintendos, right, and the Ataris, right. So the form factor has changed drastically over the years, and each one has its nuances and its.
Everybody's got their favorite. Yeah, I think it's really based on where they spent the most hours as a child getting pleasure out of using that device.
Yeah, and you just
or a young adult or whatever.
Yeah, you just adapt, right? Because in the beginning you were using a block, and now you're using.
I didn't use the PS2 controller until after it actually used modern controllers.
Right.
I don't like it.
Right.
But
so
I swear by it.
So it's almost when you go from a block to a formed controller, I think there's a substantial jump, and then after that it's just sort of nuanced changes, right? But when I hold on to the Xbox One controller, it just feels natural.
What about those square? What were they? NES controllers?
Right.
The old original. Like you play Zelda on those.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The little blocks, the little almost like a wood block.
If that's your thing, if you still got one that you can somehow plug magically into your computer and have it work, awesome.
Right. Exactly.
Just a second, I got a cough.
So there you go. Yeah, not to be contrary to you like the 360 and I one-upped you, but it does feel different.
So I'm going to quickly show you some of the reference materials that I'm sourcing from. I'm going to give links. I mean, these are things you can find. So the one link for sure you'll get from the show notes will be this tutorial treasury that I just pointed at. But everybody should already have a hot link on their top bar or whatever makes it easy is a link to the API pages. I got a cough again, sorry. This is my most used resource of all on the Corona website. The thing that people should realize is on the left side here is, I pointed this out before, is a list of all the different libraries. But also if you scroll down, it's a list of all the different kinds of events, and I'll make this bigger so we can see this. All the different kinds of events that Corona supports. And among these are the Axis, which is for joysticks and gamepads and stuff like that. And let's see, where is it? Mouse, which is, of course, mouse. I don't get to explain that. And then key, which is both the keyboard, but it's also sort of like the universal catcher for any other device that can have buttons on. So your controller throws key events. Your handheld remote control for your Fire TV, it throws key events. So when you get into doing these odds and end controllers, that's the go-to for all key inputs. Today we're going to discuss key and mouse. And for reference, those pages look like this. And the key, you click on it, it takes you to the key event. And if you scroll down, it tells you some details about what's supported on what devices. For example, OS X, any of the simulated devices will catch keyboard inputs. But Windows Simulator, only Android simulated devices will catch the keyboard inputs under the premise that iOS doesn't support keys, so we're not going to simulate it supporting keys. The fact that the OS X simulator catches them for all varieties of devices is just a byproduct of the implementation of their simulator. Although I've railed against them several times, I'm sure if Rob watches this video or any of the other guys, they'll remember my discussions with them about, come on guys, just flip the switch and let key inputs go in on all simulated devices so I don't have to keep using an Android simulated device on Windows. What else? Okay, so the more important bit here is the properties for both of these events. So if you go to the reference, it gives you a long list of all the different properties that come in on the device. Descriptor, which is a very deep and detailed discussion we won't go into today. The device, it'll tell you, for example, on the keys, if you've got a keyboard, these things make sense. Is the Alt key down? Did the user press the Command key? Is the Control key down? It'll tell you the key name, which is the actual name that you see on your keyboard, typically. Not always, and I'll show you some cases where that's not the case. Event name is just, it's going to be the name of the event, so that'll be key. And then these are important, native key codes. So native key codes are sort of like the universal mapping for what the number is that goes with the actual key that was used on that device. So when you parse through these things, you really need to experiment and look up references on what the key codes are going to be and what the names of the keys are going to be before you say, oh, well, I'm just going to assume that the backspace key is backspace. Well, surprise, surprise, that isn't what it is. It's something else. So you need to take these things into account. And I'm going to give people today, as part of this discussion, some tools to research that stuff on their own easily. So when they start on the road to figuring out what keys they're going to assign to what functionality, they can test these key inputs and go, oh, that's the name of the event that I need to be looking for. And then phase. Now, one thing I find real confusing, and some other people do too, is unlike the touch phases, which have a began and an end, and they also have a moved in some other phases, but they have a began and an end phase. Keys, on the other hand, are up and down. So they're the equivalent of began and end, where down is began and up is ended. But it's named differently, and I kind of see where they're going with that. But I know that some people, they do this, and they write their code, and they're like, oh, my keyboard code's not working. And I look at it, and then I see, oh, began and ended. No, it's up and down. So it's like, okay, or down and up to correlate with those events. The other event is mice or mouse. Again, there's a discussion on platform support. Interestingly, the Android devices support mouse inputs. Some do anyways. iOS, again, does not. Although I still wonder today, now that we're going to the big form factor of the iPad Pro, if someday they're going to have some kind of mouse equivalent input on the iOS devices. I don't know.
You know, I wouldn't. I'm not suggesting this, but but I've heard tale of jailbreaking devices and then being able to use a mouse with them.
Yeah. I've read a little bit about jailbreaking iOS devices, and I mean, it seems like it's a deep and dark topic, but interesting.
Yeah, but there are documented cases of being able to use a mouse with an iPad, so it's not too far-fetched.
Yeah. I mean, I read somebody was actually able to install Linux on an iPad or something like that, and I was like, really? Awesome. That would have mouse support.
For sure.
Some kind of kernel. So, anyways, OS 10, mouse support, obviously. Win32 desktop. I think it's interesting that they say Win32 desktop. It's worth noting that the Win32 simulator also supports it. And I can't remember right now if the iOS simulated devices also do, but we can go check it out while we're doing this discussion. But I'm going to put also in people's hands today. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to point out while you were there, a lot of people universally say Windows, and they mean Microsoft products, right? And Windows has not only expanded but also gone through several different iterations on its own, right? So we've got, we have RT, and we have desktop, Win32, and then we have Windows Phone, right? So the Windows brand, whenever you're talking about things, can be kind of confusing. So say Win32 desktop, it's
that makes sense.
Very descriptive.
No, you're right. Okay, you're right. So that's good that they put it there because
because right below
the
Windows
binaries
Phone.
we're focused on are Win32 desktop binaries.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Right. Okay, so here's a tip. As with the key inputs, the mouse input says on the properties list that it's got these properties. Is the primary button down. So your left mouse button, secondary is your right mouse button, and middle is what it sounds like the middle mouse button for 3-button users like myself. And it says the event name, which is just going to be mouse, the time the event occurred, and the X and Y position of the mouse. But the thing is this is out of date, and so I'm giving you some demo code to go with this show. In fact, I should probably file here's a tip for watchers. When you find a problem with the documentation, click the report an issue button and go file your comment on what's wrong. So I need to go read through this again and see if it hasn't been referenced elsewhere, but in my opinion, the properties list is missing some items, because the mouse will also tell you if the Alt, Command, Control keys or all those modifier keys have been pushed, and it's got a bunch of other input details about the mouse, like the scroll wheel if you've been scrolling, how many clicks have been clicked, although I don't think that works. And you can even, like on my mouse, I've got a 3-button mouse with the middle button is actually a scroll wheel. You can scroll it, you can push it down, and you can toggle it left to right. And I'll show it to you in a minute, but they have this X and Y axis thing for the middle mouse scroll wheel. And all of those things are here, but they don't list this documentation. So all I'm saying is there are more features than are being listed. If I consider that this is a problem, I will actually file an issue, and perhaps this will get updated in the future. But if you want to see everything that it's reporting, you can use the demo that I'm going to give with today's show to do just that. So why don't we jump into the demo code, and I'll show you the 2 demos first. Let me bring it up here so you can see what we're talking about. So on my screen, I am showing using the Windows simulator, and I am running a borderless device, and I've created a custom iPad-like resolution device. It's got the same aspect ratio, and I made one so that it would fit nicely on my screen so I can take screenshots. But any of the borderless Android devices will work for this demonstration. So for example, Android 800 by 1280. It's just that for me that's a little taller than my screen, so I don't like it. So let me go back to my custom designed Android iPad resolution. And hold on. Something just went wrong with the video.
No, well, we still see it on this end.
Okay, good. As long as you guys still see it.
Yeah,
all right, so what I'm running here is, let me show you the folder. First of all, when you go to look for this on the Git, you're going to look into the I Can Make That folder where we've been putting all our games work. Now there's going to be a subfolder called Desktop Games, because I think we're going to do more than one in the future. And then under there is a folder called Device Input, which is today's discussion. So you'll find a zip file here. In fact, I'll give a direct zip link. You can download it, and you'll get a folder containing 4 projects. These 4 projects are Keyboard Alternate, which is something that I may or may not have time to discuss today, Mouse, and then my starting project for the gamepad joystick, which is still very much a work in progress, so don't expect a lot out of it at this point. In fact, it's not a good reference yet, so I wouldn't really rely upon it. So we're running Keyboard right now, and Keyboard, when you run it, will show you the status of the Control key, the Command key if you're a Mac user, the Alt key, and the Shift key. And then, assuming that you're running an Android simulated device, and the console will print stuff out. So let me put these side by side. As soon as I click in here and start typing on my keyboard, you'll start to see changes, and it'll tell me what the phase is. So if I press the D button down, it'll say down. It'll say I'm pressing the key D. It's worth noting that the keys all come in lowercase, so you need to pay attention to the Shift key. If you need that to be like uppercase D, you're going to have to pay attention to the Shift. However, when you push the Shift down and the D button down, then you'll get D button pressed down and the Shift key is pressed, and the key code for that was 68. Now here's an interesting fact. This varies between OS X and Windows, I believe. Control key is an independent key and will register a key down, and you'll get a key name for it. You'll also get an indicator that the Control key is pressed, but there's a right control and a left control. However, I'm pressing the right control right now, and it's still calling it left control. So this is one of those oddities you've got to take into account. If I were to run this on OS X, I believe that these would come in correctly as left and right control. Then there's the command key, which I don't have on Windows. Let me see. Yeah, I don't have that. I have the little Windows button key, which does, I can press that and the world goes crazy. So that doesn't get registered at all. However, the Alt key gets registered, but you'll notice you can't tell it, but I'm pressing the Alt key right now and it's not lighting up. So that's not a key that will trigger an event on its own on Windows. But if I press Alt D, no, Alt, oh, I forgot. You know what? In the Windows simulator, Alt keys are masked. So you may need to build this project for Windows. It won't say beta in the latest release. Release it for Windows and run it again, and then press the Alt key and see if it gets sent in as an independent key. But I think that the Alt key is one of those keys that only shows up when you push the Alt and another button. And then Shift key is also an independent key and of course can be combined with other keys. It's got its own shift key codes, left and right shift, 160, 161.
Now okay, so the key code does change.
Yeah, the key code changes for shift, but not control. So I'm pushing the left control button and the right control button. And they both come in as control key code 162. My keyboard has no differentiation on this. So these are the kind of things, especially when you're dealing with modifier keys, that you need to consider, because those keys get treated differently on different keyboards. The common keys, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, those are all pretty standard across keyboards. It's just the modifier keys that are a little bit weird, like the escape key and control, shift, alt. So I'll just show it to you briefly. The alt keyboard demo runs exactly the same, except I did something different. I modified the phases to be ended and began. So what I do is I copy the event that comes in, and then I return a copy of that event where I've modified it. And then I do some additional stuff. I won't show you the code. You can look at it yourself. But what it's called is, I call it key cleaning. I detect that if you're on an OS X machine, and I rename some of the key names, the bit that comes out here, so they match Windows. Because as a Windows developer, I want my inputs to be consistent across the board. And I want to do all my testing on Windows, and then I just want to run it and let it work on OS X. So I have a little module that basically goes through and cleans up keys that I previously had a problem with not matching, and make sure, based on the key code, that they give the same name. Because when I look at my key events, I look at the phase and the name of the key to decide what to do. I don't look at key codes. Other people look at key codes, and that's fine. But my brain works better when I say, okay, I got to do something when the D key is pressed. Maybe I'll say it. The W key. I said when the W key is pressed, which is W. No, it's key code 87. I don't remember key code 87. Just not how my brain works. Okay, so and then mouse, and then we'll look at the code. The code is very straightforward, however. So now mouse is an extremely noisy event. It's a runtime event. You start it up, and then it just catches everything. Now you'll recall that I said that the mouse event as listed in the documentation only had a few details. Basically, the details that they listed were X and Y, the time, and what was it? I think that was about it, actually. Oh yeah, left, right, middle mouse button pushed.
And for those who may not understand the term noisy, what do you mean by that?
When I say noisy, I'm printing out every key event as it comes in over here in the console, and so every time I move my mouse even a little bit, I get new events. You can see how I'm getting all that activity in the console. So with a mouse event, you got to be really careful what you do when that event comes in, if every time a mouse event comes in you do some kind of heavy calculation, you're going to bog your game down, even on a desktop. You know, maybe less so, but still, you're doing work that you don't need to do. So you got to be very selective about when you do work based on inputs from this event. So that's my word of caution. We'll discuss this more later when we use a mouse to actually do something in a game.
Okay, that makes sense.
Sorry, I had to take a drink of water there.
That's cool.
Okay, so as I said, actually, there are many more inputs here that are available. Unlike the key event, I'm going to push the control key down, and nothing's going to happen. So it doesn't detect the key event, but now if I start moving my mouse, you can see that the control key is pressed because this turns green. And then I'm going to release it, and it resets to white because that's how I wrote my code. White means it's not pressed, green means it's pressed. And then similarly, Control Alt or Shift, etc. And then we got some other cool things here. We got the Scroll XY. So Scroll X is if you got a scroller on your mouse and you click it, you know, forward and backwards, it gives you a very discrete number of pixels, whatever your mouse is telling it is. In fact, I have an adjustable mouse, so let's experiment. When I scroll, I get plus and minus 120, but let me just do an up click on what that is. A down click. Okay, so I can adjust the speed of my mouse, but that does not change the scroll value. But you can tell if it was scrolled forward, which is plus 120 for me, so it's a positive number, and then scrolled towards me, or reverse backwards, is negative. So these are the kind of things you need to check out and say, okay, maybe I want to flip that for some people or deal with that differently, but it's an input. So that was the Y. But there's also an X, which I thought was really cool. I'd totally forgotten this until I did the demo. But my mouse scroll wheel can also be pushed left and right. And when I do that, I get these inputs, plus and minus 120, which is just the other axis equivalent of me scrolling. And I can push my button down, and I get the middle mouse button. So it's kind of like I got all these choices. Now, personally, I don't ever use the middle mouse button to do controls for anything, because you can't rely on people having these other mouse buttons, which is a point I want to make. When we choose what game we're going to make, we have to choose a subset of the controls that we know everybody will have. Everybody will have a keyboard. Not everybody will have a command key. Everybody will have all the other keys. And not everybody will have a right and a middle mouse button. For Mac users that are still old school, they've only got the one mouse button. Now they can access the equivalent or a additional button by pushing the function key down, the special function key on their keyboard, and then clicking the mouse. But not all mouse users, not all OS X users know that. So you can only rely on the left mouse button. That's my opinion. If you're trying to develop a universal game for OS X and Windows, you can only rely on people having a left mouse button, which kind of narrows things way down as far as, you know, developing games or inputs. So anyways, let's take a look at the code.
Well, are we going to address at any point in a future show, like being able to have more than one type of input, like where we say, you know, in the example you just gave, like we'll be able to figure out if you have a 2-button mouse and then...
Are you talking about remapping or a discovery?
I guess so.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so that's really a discussion for controllers, although it applies in some sense to mice too. Something that's common in games is they do just what I said. They say, we can only rely on people having this subset of features based on where we're releasing the game and for what.
Common denominator.
But then they can make a remapping feature where people can say, I've got a controller that's got more buttons. Like some people have really fancy keyboards, or some people have really fancy mice that have extra buttons on them. And you can capture those inputs, like the buttons on the mouse. You can capture those extra buttons with a key event and provide a way for people to map those extra buttons onto some functionality in your game because they're a power player who's got the super mouse with the 20 buttons on it, and they can actually find them all in the heat of the battle. So yeah, we should definitely discuss remapping, but I'm not prepared for it today because it's kind of like a
Oh yeah, it sounds like an advanced topic for sure.
yeah, it's quite advanced in the sense that you have to approach it in a way where people don't get stuck, or it's yeah.
It just seems like we would definitely approach that territory when we start talking about maybe whether you could use keyboard and or mouse, right? So if you could maybe create a game that could be played either way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, another thing people do is not key mapping, but they provide alternate configurations where you can go into a menu and say, I've got a 3-button mouse. I want to use a 3-button mouse configuration. Boom, and it lays out all the keyboard and mouse controls based on that. So yeah, we could definitely do that.
Okay.
All right, so we're running short on time, so I'm just going to direct people to the code and I give them an overview. All of the code in these examples is the same in its structure. They all come with a small file called folder called SSK, which has got just a limited set of features from my SSK library for things that I wanted to use. For particular, I wanted to use the table dump function that I have in the library so that I could print out all of the contents of the event without having to manually do it myself. So that's coming out of SSK. And then because table dump uses some other features, those are also required. So I've got a number of files from SSK, but they're not really relevant to this discussion. They're just for ease of coding the example. The important and really the only important file is main Lua. Config and build settings are merely, in this case, to set up the device size and the orientation. They have nothing whatsoever to do with the inputs. So if we look at the keyboard main.lua, the structure of this file and the structure of the mouse file also is at the top. I do a little housekeeping. I set the status bar to be off because I don't want that to be visible. And I change the buffering so that I make sure that I get all the console messages right away instead of having to wait for them. Now, that's not necessarily a problem on the desktop, but I just do it all the time by proxy or default. So it's done. You can just ignore it. The next bit is I load in SSK. Again, totally you can ignore this. It's not part of the example so much as gives me a way of making my code simpler. And then I just did some, I localized get timer because I like to use that without calling system get timer. I'm a lazy typist. And I made 2 color codes. I made 2 variables, one called G, one called W. And in these are tables for the green color code and the white color code so that I don't have to type those over and over. And then you'll find a section called visual feedback. Now, visual feedback merely creates these circles and labels on the screen and places them in a place that is nice to look at. And I give the circles names like Control or Command, Alt, Shift, and those are the circle indicators. Let me close this again. So Control, that's this bubble here or circle. Command, Alt, Shift. And I create them up here. I put the reference to them in locals. And then I have some labels down here where I want to change the content, like the key name label or the key code label. And then I create the listener. And this is the part that people need to look at. I believe I've created full event listeners that will show you everything that's coming in. And you'll be able to see it simply by running the example and clicking and moving your mouse or whatever it is, which example you're running. So for example, the keyboard is clicking on the keys and doing whatever. You'll see everything. However, in the listener at the very bottom, I also dump out the event that gets passed in because different key devices, not just the keyboard. This example could be used to discover other key inputs. You would run it and then press the keys on your other device, and you could look at the console or the log, and you could see all these things that are coming in, And there may actually be more fields than what we're catching today. There could be additional fields that are specific to that kind of device, or yeah, that's it. If it comes in on the standard fields, you'll be able to see it on the simulated output. You'll see the output here. For example, if I were running this on Fire TV, Fire TV, and I was pushing the left and right controller, the little circle button, then you would see the phase names come in, and you'd see a key name, probably like left and right. I think there's a volume up, volume down button, maybe. I can't remember everything. Fast forward, reverse. Those would all come in here, and you'd see the key code and the name that is being used by that device for that input. So although this project is called Keyboard, you can use it for other things, for discoverability. So, but the format of this is, as I said, the visual feedback part, and then the listener. The listeners for these events are all runtime listeners. And what I do is, for this example, I simply created a function called onKey. You'll also notice that I give a link to the reference, so you can go look at the key details. And then I break out all the important parts of the event. I extract the key name into a local variable key, the device into a local device, key code, is the control key down, etc., etc. And then I merely look at those details, and I change the color of the indicators, or if the key is being pressed down, I change the key code and the key text, so I know what key name came in. So the only thing that people might see here or they're not familiar with is, for example, if the control key is down, I say control, set fill color, and then I call unpack G. And what that does is it takes this table that I stored in G, and it separates it into 3 arguments and passes them as if I had typed 0, 0 instead of this. So this is the equivalent of 0, 1, 0 if I had typed that. So I guess that's probably shorter now that I think about it. But I like control, so here, if I had decided that green was not the color I wanted, I could just change the key color up here and then I'd be done. So I unpack G and I change the color. If it's not down, then I set it back to white. And you'll notice that I put these all on one line, which is kind of a little weird for some people, but I wanted the code to be tight so people could read through it quickly. And that's it. Mouse, same structure. More details, all broken out and set. So people can easily crawl through this code and run it, and they'll be in good shape to start discovering key inputs and mouse inputs.
Very nice.
So before I close my screen, is there any question you want to ask about the demo? Because I'm going to go to my camera.
I don't think so. Anybody else have a...
Okay. So we're 5 minutes over, but I want to close this with a question and a statement, I guess. Is as I said earlier, you have to make your game development decisions based on the inputs you've got available to you and the outputs you've got available. So the outputs are unlimited. We've got desktop. We can do all kinds of crazy stuff. We can go way overboard with particles and objects, and way more than we could ever do with the iOS or Android devices because they're limited processing power. But we do have some limits on inputs that we can assume for this show, for our listeners, that they all have. They all have a keyboard, and they all have at least a left mouse button, that is. So I would like to assume that that's our basis and select a game based on those criteria and what we already got from our last game that can be modified and co-opted into a new game. So I'm going to propose now our choices. I've said some things, but I realized when I did today's example, we've got more choices. And they're all very popular. Things that we can easily make by modifying our previous game and adding keyboard and mouse inputs are a tower defense game, a platformer, a standard platformer that allows you to jump on platforms, jump through platforms, think Mario's old school style. We can easily make a platformer that has level-to-level doors and all the other things that the other platformer had, but then you'll be able to navigate from one scene back to another scene, so it's like a big world instead of just a unidirectional, more like Mario, original Mario. And even the original Mario actually had doors that went between world segments, so that's not exactly a perfect factual statement. We can also do top-down shooters, like bullet hells, things like that. We could definitely do that, although I think that's more suitable for a controller input, so I kind of want to say no. Keyboard control of those is not so good, and a mouse it's doable, but it's not quite as natural to me as a device handheld controller. And then a racing game, top-down racing game. But again, I kind of think that's more of a controller. So what do you guys on the panel think would be the most fun to do out of tower defense, Mario platform, more complex Mario platformer, top-down shooter, or racing?
Top-down shooter.
In my humble opinion, go ahead, Sir Jacob.
Say again, Brian?
In my opinion, I think a platformer gives itself to the controller a little bit more easily than, say, a tower defense type style game.
Okay, so that's wait for a controller on platformer?
I think go.
For keyboard and mouse, then, what game would we do? Say yours again. Okay, you guys, I got confused there. Sergey, you said?
I said top-down shooter.
Top-down shooter. We got one top-down shooter.
You can use mouse to point to somebody. You can scroll the wheel to change weapons, keyboard to move, and I don't know, some special actions perform.
I'm okay. I'm down with that. But Brian, what's your vote here? Keyboard and mouse input.
Oh, that's tough. I've always loved tower defense style games, but the top-down shooter gives itself very well to the mouse keyboard environment.
Okay. Now I'm not going to give Charles a vote, even though it's his hangout. No, Charles, give us your vote, man.
You know, my first thought was the top-down shooter.
Okay, I'm going to agree. Here's my thought. I think I'm going to go out on a limb here. Actually, for me, developing the top-down shooter first would be easier to segue people into using the mouse and the keyboard. However, there's a negative side here that you guys didn't really think about, which is it's not really suitable for the prior code that I already have in place from the last game. I can't immediately see a way to use that to implement this or edit this. Now, I still think let's do a top-down shooter, basic top-down shooter, using the mouse to aim, keyboard to move, and maybe add some additional. Once we've done that and gotten people kind of familiar with the inputs, let's go and do a tower defense game. Because I can definitely co-opt the code from Monsters Need Coins to make a tower defense and the editor and the whole thing right away.
And let's the top-down shooter level editor from tiled, like import levels from tiled.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's approach it this way. Let me do. And usually the way I'll approach a new game is no editor to start, and then figure out how an editor can be used to implement levels. So instead of doing it upside down, because for me, without knowing what my interaction mechanics are exactly, it's hard for me to say how should I deal with the inputs from a editor. So let's leave that. I would like to leave that tabled for a future episode of that game. It's definitely a good idea, but not sure how that'll be done at this point. And what was the editor again? Tiled?
Tiled. I have the code to import, to parse the files. It's very easy. I can send you.
Okay.
Are you using Dusk, or have you made your own?
My own.
Okay.
Yeah, please do email me about that, and I'll put that in my notes that I keep for doing these hangouts.
Yeah.
And you see on the forums.
Go ahead.
You see on the forums quite a bit of discussion of using Dusk with tiled, and so it's become a real popular format.
Yeah, I've been a little busy lately. My queue on
Sure.
things to answer in the forums have gotten way behind. So,
Right.
but I did see
And
the
it's just
discussion. It was a
and
discussion.
I'm aware of it
about
because
I
many
just
of my
didn't grok
students
it
are
all.
using Dusk. So it's become very popular and a lot of discussion in the forums.
It is.
So.
Dusk is also a good option.
Yeah.
By Caleb Place,
but it's
right?
still a better tool for parsing and using map systems, then I'm all for that as well. Especially if he's going to open source it like Dusk.
All right, guys. I think that's it. I think we've.
All right. So next week we will discuss creating a top-down shooter using a mouse and keyboard inputs.
I'm only going to say one thing though. It's going to have zombies. It's got to have zombies.
Gotta have them, yeah, of course. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this because I think we've done a platformer game in the past, sort of just to look at the mechanics. Of course, it wasn't a desktop, but I think once people understand the way that the inputs work, then they could probably go back and map that to a platformer on their own. Tower defense, again, we've always talked about this as one of those things when you look at something you go, how did they do that? So that would be a good question to answer. And if we can definitely take the previous game and morph that'll be an interesting conversation as well. How to take something that was developed for mobile, morph it into a desktop, and then kind of change genres almost into a desktop tower defense.
Monsters Need Coins. You made me think of this. Is totally mappable to a controller, joystick, whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't think it wouldn't be. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So that'll be a fun. But yeah, doing the top-down shooter is something we haven't done yet, and it too is one of those things when you see it, you're kind of like, how did they do that? So we'll kind of answer a bunch of questions all at one time, I think. So
this will be an exploration for me a little bit. I know the basics of it, but
awesome. All right, well, good deal. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. We'll be back here next Monday when we pick up where we left off. And until then, have a great week and happy coding.
Auf Wiedersehen.